Your soulmate couldn't ignore what they felt after seeing the real you. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this story begins with a moment that looked ordinary to everyone else but quietly changed two lives forever. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. Sometimes people believe they know someone after a few conversations, a few smiles, or a handful of shared memories. But there comes a day when the mask falls away, and they finally see the real person standing before them. That was the day your soulmate could no longer ignore what was happening inside their heart. It wasn't your appearance that captured their attention. It wasn't the words you spoke. It was the quiet strength of your character, the kindness hidden in your smallest actions, and the peace you carried even through your own struggles. For a long time, they had convinced themselves that keeping emotional distance was the safest choice. They believed they understood people well enough to protect themselves from disappointment. They rarely allowed anyone to get close because they feared vulnerability more than loneliness. Every relationship remained guarded behind invisible walls. But then they began noticing something different about you. You never tried to force your way into their life. You never demanded attention or asked to be understood. You simply remained authentic, showing the same kindness in private that you showed in public. That quiet consistency unsettled them in the best possible way. Don't skip. This changes everything. One afternoon, they watched you help someone who could offer nothing in return. There were no cameras, no applause, and no audience waiting to praise you. You acted with compassion simply because it was who you were. They stood silently, realizing they had never witnessed kindness expressed with such sincerity. At that moment, something shifted inside them. They began questioning every assumption they had made about love, trust, and genuine connection. They understood that true character is revealed not during life's easiest moments but during the quiet moments when no one is watching. As the days passed, they found themselves paying attention to details they had once ignored. They noticed how patiently you listened when others spoke. They noticed how you celebrated someone else's success without jealousy. They noticed that even when life became difficult, bitterness never seemed to take control of your heart. Instead of complaining, you chose gratitude. Instead of responding with anger, you chose understanding. Those small moments slowly built an image of someone they could no longer dismiss as ordinary. Without realizing it, they had begun admiring not just who you were, but who you inspired them to become. Listen carefully because something huge is waiting for you. One evening, while sitting alone after a long day, they caught themselves smiling at a memory of you. It wasn't a dramatic memory. It was something incredibly simple, a conversation, a shared laugh, or the calm expression on your face during a difficult moment. Yet that memory refused to leave. They replayed it again and again until they finally whispered, "Why do they keep crossing my mind?" The answer frightened them because it was so honest. They weren't simply remembering you. They were slowly falling in love with the person they had finally learned to see. The realization didn't arrive all at once. It grew quietly, like the first light before sunrise. Every day added another piece to the picture. Every interaction revealed another reason to admire you. They realized you never pretended to be perfect. You admitted your mistakes with humility. You treated people with dignity regardless of what they could offer you. You carried pain without allowing it to harden your heart. That combination of strength and gentleness became impossible for them to ignore. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. One night they looked into the mirror and barely recognized themselves. The person staring back was no longer focused on avoiding emotional risk. Instead, they found themselves asking a completely different question: have I been so afraid of getting hurt that I almost walked past someone truly extraordinary? That question echoed through every corner of their heart. For the first time, they realized fear had been keeping them from experiencing something genuine. They began noticing how your presence affected them in ways they couldn't explain. Ordinary conversations suddenly became the highlight of their day. A simple message from you could bring peace after hours of stress. Seeing you encourage someone else inspired them to become more patient with the people in their own life. They weren't just attracted to you. They were being changed by the example you quietly set every single day. That frightened them because real transformation always asks us to leave behind the person we used to be. Don't skip because this changes everything. They finally understood that what they felt wasn't built on fantasy or excitement alone. It was built on respect. They admired your resilience after difficult seasons. They admired your ability to forgive without becoming naive. They admired the way you remained hopeful even when life gave you every reason to become discouraged. Those qualities reached places inside their heart they had spent years trying to protect. As another sunrise filled the sky with light, they whispered something they had never admitted before: the real person I discovered wasn't someone I expected to meet, it was someone who reminded me of the kind of person I want to become. In that moment, they understood that genuine love isn't only about finding someone special. It's about meeting someone whose character inspires your own heart to grow. My beloved child, don't skip because the next chapter will reveal the moment your soulmate realizes these feelings are no longer possible to hide. The quiet admiration they once carried in silence is about to become a truth that changes everything, leading them toward a decision they never imagined they would have the courage to make. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this chapter begins on a night when silence became louder than words. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. After seeing the real you, your soulmate tried to convince themselves that nothing had changed. They buried themselves in work, kept busy with daily routines, and told themselves these feelings would eventually disappear. But no matter how hard they tried to move forward, something always brought them back to thoughts of you. It wasn't because you demanded their attention. It was because your authenticity had quietly left a lasting impression on their heart. Each morning started the same way. They reached for their phone without thinking, hoping to distract themselves with ordinary tasks. Yet somehow, every small moment reminded them of you. A familiar song played during the drive to work. A stranger smiled with the same kindness you always showed others. Someone spoke about loyalty, compassion, or second chances, and your face immediately came to mind. These weren't dramatic signs or impossible coincidences. They were simple reminders of how deeply one genuine person can influence another without even realizing it. Listen carefully. This changes everything. One evening, while sitting alone after a long day, they began asking themselves questions they had avoided for months. Why does their kindness stay with me? Why do I keep comparing every conversation to the ones I had with them? Why does my heart feel calmer whenever I remember their voice? Those questions didn't frighten them anymore. Instead, they led them toward a truth they had spent too long denying. The feelings they carried were no longer temporary. They had quietly become part of who they were. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. They opened an old notebook where they often wrote thoughts they never shared with anyone else. Page after page revealed dreams, fears, and personal reflections, but one empty page caught their attention. Without planning it, they picked up a pen and began writing about you. They described your patience, your honesty, your quiet confidence, and the way you treated people with respect even when no one noticed. When they finally looked down at what they had written, they were surprised by how naturally the words had come. It was the first time they admitted, even privately, that your presence had changed them forever. As the days continued, their closest friends noticed a difference. You weren't mentioned often, but whenever your name came up, your soulmate's expression softened. There was a warmth in their eyes that hadn't been there before. One friend gently smiled and asked, "Why do you always look so thoughtful when someone talks about them?" They paused for a long moment before quietly replying, "Because they showed me something I didn't know I was missing." No one laughed. No one interrupted. Everyone could hear the sincerity behind those words. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. That same weekend, your soulmate found themselves returning to a place where they had once shared a meaningful conversation with you. The surroundings looked almost the same, yet everything felt different because they were no longer the same person. They sat quietly, remembering how easy it had been to talk with you, how naturally you listened, and how your calm presence made even difficult moments feel lighter. Looking back, they realized those memories had become some of the most treasured moments of their life, not because they were perfect, but because they were real. Listen carefully because this changes everything. As they reflected on everything that had happened, they understood that the greatest lesson you had taught them wasn't about romance alone. You had shown them the importance of living authentically. You never pretended to be someone else just to be accepted. You remained true to your values even when it wasn't the easiest choice. That quiet courage inspired them to examine their own life. They began letting go of the habits that no longer reflected who they wanted to become. Little by little, they started building a life guided by honesty instead of fear. One peaceful evening, while watching the sunset, they whispered something they had never spoken aloud before. "I didn't fall for a perfect person. I fell for someone who was real." Those words brought an unexpected smile to their face. They finally realized that genuine love isn't built on flawless moments or impossible expectations. It grows through trust, respect, compassion, and the courage to see another person exactly as they are, and appreciate them even more because of it. My beloved child, don't skip because the next chapter will reveal the moment your soulmate decides that keeping these feelings hidden is no longer possible. After all the reflection, growth, and quiet realizations, they are about to make a decision that will test their courage like never before. Whether the future brings a heartfelt conversation, a chance to rebuild a connection, or simply the peace that comes from speaking honestly, one thing has become certain: seeing the real you didn't just change how they felt about you, it changed how they saw themselves, and that transformation is only the beginning of the story. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this chapter begins at the exact moment your soulmate realizes that hiding their feelings is no longer possible. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. For weeks they had tried to convince themselves that what they felt would eventually fade. They believed that if they stayed busy long enough, worked hard enough, and ignored every memory, their heart would finally become quiet. But every attempt only led them back to the same place, you. The more they tried to forget, the more clearly they remembered the person you truly were. They finally understood that some people are impossible to replace because they leave an imprint on the soul rather than just a memory in the mind. One evening, while watching the sunset disappear behind the horizon, your soulmate sat alone thinking about everything that had happened. The silence around them was peaceful, yet inside their heart emotions were louder than ever before. They remembered every conversation that made them laugh, every difficult moment you helped them through, and every time you believed in them when they couldn't believe in themselves. Looking back, they realized they had spent too much time searching for perfection while overlooking something far more valuable, someone who was genuine. You had never pretended to be flawless. You simply showed up with honesty, kindness, and patience, and those qualities slowly became unforgettable. Listen carefully. This changes everything. As they reflected on those memories, they asked themselves a question they had avoided for months. If I had another chance to speak from my heart, what would I say? At first, no answer came. Then, almost without thinking, the words appeared in their mind. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like. That single sentence carried more emotion than they had ever expected. It wasn't just gratitude for the relationship. It was gratitude for the person you inspired them to become. They realized that meeting you had changed their definition of love forever. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. The following morning, they found themselves smiling for no obvious reason. It wasn't because every problem had disappeared. It was because they had finally stopped fighting their own emotions. They no longer viewed love as something that made them weak. Instead, they understood that allowing yourself to care deeply requires incredible strength. That realization gave them a sense of freedom they had never experienced before. Every step they took that day felt lighter because they were no longer carrying the burden of pretending they didn't care. As the week continued, people around them began noticing the change. Friends commented that they seemed calmer. Family members noticed they smiled more often. Even strangers experienced their patience and kindness in ways that hadn't been there before. Your soulmate wasn't trying to impress anyone. Their heart had simply softened. The lessons they learned from knowing you had quietly begun shaping every area of their life. They became more understanding, more compassionate, and more willing to listen before speaking. They realized that genuine love continues changing us long after a conversation ends. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, they found an old note they had written during one of the most confusing seasons of their life. It contained a list of fears: fear of rejection, fear of vulnerability, fear of trusting someone completely. As they reread those words, they quietly smiled. They hardly recognized the person who had written them. Those fears no longer controlled them. They had discovered that the greatest risk was never opening your heart. The greatest risk was keeping it closed forever. Listen carefully because this changes everything. Your soulmate finally accepted that love is not about finding someone who never makes mistakes. It is about finding someone whose heart remains kind even after life has tested it. They admired your resilience, your quiet confidence, and the way you continued choosing compassion even during difficult moments. Those qualities became the reason they could no longer ignore what they truly felt. It wasn't excitement alone that drew them toward you. It was deep respect. Respect for your character. Respect for your integrity. Respect for the way you carried yourself with grace through every season. As another evening arrived, they looked up at the stars and whispered softly, "If life gives me another opportunity, I won't waste it hiding behind fear." There was no desperation in those words. There was only quiet determination. They had finally become someone willing to let honesty guide their choices instead of uncertainty. For the first time, they weren't afraid of what tomorrow might bring because they knew they would face it with sincerity instead of silence. My beloved child, don't skip because the next chapter will reveal the unexpected moment when your soulmate's quiet transformation becomes impossible for others to ignore. The people closest to them will begin asking questions, noticing the change in their heart, and encouraging them to follow the truth they have tried so hard to hide. What begins as one honest conversation will soon become the turning point that neither of you ever expected, proving that the strongest connections are not built on perfect timing, they are built on courage, growth, and the willingness to love without pretending to be someone you're not. The truth they could no longer hide ***. My beloved child, don't skip. Listen carefully, because this chapter begins on a morning that seemed completely ordinary, yet before the day was over, your soulmate would realize that their heart was no longer willing to stay silent. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. For weeks they had carried their feelings in secret, believing they could simply live with them. They smiled when people expected them to smile, laughed during conversations, and continued their daily routine as though nothing had changed. But deep inside, something was different. Every sunrise reminded them that another day had passed without telling you the truth, and every sunset reminded them that time never waits for anyone. As they walked through another busy day, they noticed something unexpected. People around them were talking about future plans, relationships, and dreams they hoped to build one day. Those conversations usually meant very little to them, but this time every word seemed to point back to you. They began asking themselves difficult questions. Who was the first person I wanted to tell when something good happened? The answer was you. Who understood me without asking me to become someone else? Again, the answer was you. They realized that your place in their heart had never disappeared. It had simply been hidden beneath layers of fear they had finally grown tired of carrying. Listen carefully. This changes everything. That afternoon, they met one of their closest friends for coffee. The conversation began with ordinary topics, but before long the friend smiled knowingly and asked, "You're thinking about them again, aren't you?" Your soulmate looked surprised. They hadn't mentioned your name. They hadn't spoken about you in days. Yet somehow, the change inside them had become visible. After a long silence, they quietly nodded. Their friend smiled gently and said, you don't miss them because you're lonely. You miss them because they brought out the best version of you. Those words landed deep in their heart. They realized that what they admired most wasn't just the memories you shared. It was the person they became whenever you were part of their life. Around you, they had been more patient, more hopeful, and more willing to believe that genuine love still existed. Since then, they had searched for that same feeling elsewhere but never found it. It wasn't because no one else was kind. It was because what you shared had been built on authenticity, and authenticity cannot be replaced by appearances. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. Later that evening, they returned home and opened a box filled with old keepsakes. There was nothing expensive inside, just small reminders of meaningful moments. A handwritten note. A ticket from a place you once visited together. A photograph that captured an ordinary afternoon yet somehow held extraordinary meaning. As they held each item in their hands, they smiled through quiet tears. They finally admitted that these weren't just souvenirs from the past. They were reminders of a chapter that had forever changed the direction of their life. As the night became quieter, your soulmate stood outside beneath a sky filled with stars. They remembered something you once said during one of your longest conversations. The people who truly matter are the ones who help you become more yourself, not less. At the time, those words had seemed simple. Now they understood them completely. You had never tried to control them. You had never asked them to pretend. You simply accepted them while gently encouraging them to grow. That rare kind of acceptance had become something they could never forget. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. For the first time in a very long while, they stopped asking whether you still thought about them. Instead, they asked a completely different question: if life gave me another chance, would I finally have the courage to love without fear? The answer came almost immediately. Yes. Not because they believed everything would be easy, but because they had learned that honesty is always stronger than silence. They understood that protecting their heart by hiding it had only left them feeling more alone. Listen carefully because this changes everything. At that exact moment, your own journey was also moving forward. You had grown stronger through every challenge, discovering peace that no disappointment could steal. You no longer measured your worth by another person's actions. You had learned to appreciate your own kindness, your own resilience, and your own ability to love without losing yourself. That quiet confidence had become one of your greatest strengths, even though you rarely recognized it yourself. Meanwhile, your soulmate was finally beginning to understand that love isn't measured by dramatic moments alone. It is revealed in everyday choices. The decision to tell the truth instead of hiding it, to appreciate someone before it's too late, and to show gratitude instead of taking another heart for granted. Every lesson they had learned pointed toward one conclusion: seeing the real you had not simply awakened feelings they couldn't ignore. It had awakened the person they were always meant to become. My beloved child, don't skip because the next chapter will reveal the moment your soulmate makes the boldest decision of their journey. After months of reflection, growth, and quiet transformation, they will stop wondering, what if, and finally choose action over hesitation. The words they have carried in silence for so long are closer than ever to being spoken, and the chapter that follows will prove that the greatest changes often begin with one brave decision made from the heart. Love found its way to the truth. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay till the very end because this is the final chapter, the moment every unanswered question finally finds its place. Listen carefully, because what happened next changed everything. The long season of uncertainty was never meant to last forever. Every sleepless night, every unanswered thought, and every quiet tear had been shaping two hearts in ways neither of you could understand at the time. Sometimes life separates people just long enough for them to discover who they truly are. And when that lesson is complete, everything begins to make sense. One peaceful morning, your soulmate woke with a feeling unlike anything they had experienced before. There was no fear left to hide behind. No pride left to protect. No excuses left to delay the truth. They looked at the sunrise and quietly whispered, "I don't want to spend another day pretending I don't feel this." Those words brought a calm they had searched for over countless months. They finally understood that real courage isn't pretending you don't care. Real courage is allowing yourself to love honestly, even when the future is uncertain. Listen carefully. This changes everything. Instead of wondering what might happen, they decided to become the person they always wished they had been. They stopped running from difficult conversations. They stopped hiding behind silence. They chose honesty in every part of their life. Family noticed the change. Friends noticed the change. Even strangers noticed the peace that had begun to shine through them. They smiled more often, listened more carefully, and appreciated the little moments that once passed unnoticed. Your influence had quietly transformed their heart in ways they could never fully explain. Meanwhile, your own journey had become equally beautiful. The person who once questioned every unanswered message had discovered a strength that could never be taken away. You had learned to protect your peace while keeping your heart kind. You had stopped chasing validation because you finally understood your worth was never determined by another person's choices. Every challenge had shaped you into someone wiser, calmer, and more compassionate. Without realizing it, you had become the very example of the strength you once searched for. Don't skip because something huge is waiting for you. When your paths finally crossed again, neither of you tried to erase the past. Instead, you honored it. You spoke openly about the lessons, the fears, the mistakes, and the growth that had taken place while you were apart. There was no blame in your voices. No bitterness in your hearts. Only honesty, understanding, and gratitude for the journey that had changed both of you. For the first time, the conversation felt peaceful because neither heart was trying to prove anything. Both simply wanted to tell the truth. Stay till the end because what happened next changed everything. Instead of making impossible promises about the future, you both chose something far more meaningful. You chose patience. You chose trust. You chose to let every new day become another opportunity to show kindness through actions instead of words alone. Slowly, laughter returned. Conversations became effortless again. The silence that once created distance was replaced by respect, encouragement, and genuine friendship. Whatever the future would become, it would be built on a foundation that neither fear nor pride could break. Listen carefully because this is the greatest lesson of the entire story. Your soulmate didn't fall in love with an illusion. They fell in love with the real you. The person who remained kind during difficult seasons, honest when honesty was uncomfortable, and compassionate even after experiencing disappointment. Seeing the real you changed their heart forever because authenticity has a power that appearances can never match. They finally understood that the greatest beauty a person can possess is the courage to remain genuine in a world that constantly encourages people to pretend. As the seasons quietly passed, both of you realized that the greatest miracle had never been about perfect timing. It had been about personal transformation. Every tear had taught wisdom. Every setback had built resilience. Every unanswered question had prepared your hearts to recognize the value of truth, forgiveness, and emotional maturity. Without those difficult chapters, neither of you would have become the people standing together now, stronger, humbler, and more grateful than ever before. My beloved child, as this story gently comes to an end, remember this one truth above all else: the deepest connections are not sustained by excitement alone. They are sustained by honesty, patience, respect, forgiveness, and the daily choice to care for another person's heart. Whether life leads two people back together or guides them onto different paths, genuine love always leaves behind something beautiful. It leaves wisdom. It leaves compassion. It leaves courage. Thank you for staying until the very end. May this story remind you that the strongest hearts are not the ones that never break, but the ones that choose hope after heartbreak, kindness after disappointment, and truth after silence. As one chapter closes, another quietly begins. The future is no longer filled with fear, it is filled with possibility. And wherever the road leads next, both hearts move forward carrying the greatest gift of all. They have finally learned that real love begins the moment someone dares to show the world their true self, and another heart has the courage to cherish it completely.